That shot was from our first debate. From the Workers' Credit Union studio at FATV Studios in Fitchburg, the 2020 debate series continues with the candidates for State Senate for the Worcester and Middlesex District. Incumbent Republican State Senator Dean Tran and his Democratic challenger John Cronin. Thank you both for joining us today. Question 1. The qualifications in order to run for state senator in Massachusetts are pretty simple. 18 years old, registered to vote, and reside in the district in which you want to represent. However, to actually be elected, the voters themselves have different criteria and different qualifications to hold you to. And those can be more stringent and far more subjective. In your opinion, why are you the most qualified candidate on this stage to serve as state senator for the Worcester and Middlesex District? Mr. Cronin.
Thanks. First, thank you, Kevin. It's great to be here in studio. I want to thank Flap TV, the crew here at FATV, and Senator Tran for joining us tonight. My name is John Cronin. I was born in Leominster and raised in Fitchburg and Lunenburg. And apart from school and my service in the Army, I have lived every day of my life in this district. After high school, I worked as a janitor at the Worcester County House of Correction. When I was 19, because so many incredible people in this community invested in me, I was able to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. I graduated and commissioned as an Army officer and served in the infantry and had the great privilege to lead troops in combat on 2 tours in Afghanistan. My life experiences have taught me about hard work, sacrifice, collaboration, and teamwork. I am asking to become your next state senator because I believe leadership matters. We are living in a moment in time in history right now where some of our institutions are rising to meet the moment and some of our institutions are failing. And the critical factor between success and failure is leadership. And the critical factor between success and failure and whether our region will be a vibrant place to live and work and raise a family in the future will be leadership. 2020 is not a year to sit on the sidelines. 2020, we need people to step up, to lead, and to fight, and to serve for our values, and to restore effective, honest leadership to our government, to restore people's faith in our country. And that's why I'm running for state senate, and I'm asking for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Senator Tran.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Kevin, for inviting me here tonight and for hosting this event. Kevin, I want to start off by giving the public an insight into my background. I am a son of a Vietnam veteran, and I was born at the end of the war. At the age of 2, my family and I flee Vietnam in search of freedom on an old wooden boat. We were lucky to survive in the ocean while many around us perished. Then I spent 2 years in one of the roughest refugee camps in the world, and we survived that. At the age of 4, my family and I emigrated to the United States and called Clinton my first real home. Growing up, I faced every discrimination you can imagine, but I have worked hard to get to where I am today. I was educated by the public school system and graduated from Fitchburg High School. I went on to graduating from Brandeis University, then went on building a 23-year business experience helping to create jobs on 3 continents and was responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. I volunteered on many committees and boards. I spent 4 years on the planning board. I was elected to 12 years on the city council. Then I was elected to my first term in the state senate. Currently, I am the ranking minority member. That is leadership. And I sit on 11 committees and 2 out of 5 conference committees. And of course, I'm married to my beautiful wife, Carrie, and we have 4 wonderful children.
Good. Anyone have anything to add on this before we move on?
Well, I want to add further. As you know, I'm just not running to be elected. I'm running to be re-elected. And prior to COVID-19, in just 2 years through economic development legislation, I helped build one of the strongest economies in this nation, and I helped pass the patient-first healthcare legislation to address healthcare issues. In addition, I advocated and voted for the Student Opportunity Act, increasing school funding to the highest level ever. secured funding for police, firefighters, first responders, veterans, and seniors, and I brought home over $3.1 million in budget earmarks, over $5.2 million in project grants, and over $35.6 million in bond projects. Experience and accomplishments matter. Thank you.
Any rebuttal? No, you're good. Okay, COVID-19 has triggered a severe state budget crisis. Estimates are that the state could face up to a $6 billion shortfall. Revenues are declining and costs are rising with COVID response. Do we address this crisis through tax increases, spending cuts, or a mix? Please give voters specific taxes that you would be open to raising or specific programs you would be willing to cut in order to make up the shortfall. Senator Tran.
Thank you, Kevin. Great question. And I'm the only candidate here in this room who has experience with business and economic development. And I'll give you an insight into why I say that. Because I spent 4 years on the planning board and helped grow the residential tax base in Fitchburg. I spent 12 years on the city council where I helped attract commercial growth and include spearheading the effort to gradually move the city's dual tax rate to a single tax rate. The greater the commercial tax rate or base that we incur, the less of a burden on the homeowners. I spent 2 years in the Senate where I helped pass 2 economic development bond bills and investing in Mass Works, Mass Hire, and other job creation programs. I also helped pass $16 million for summer jobs for at-risk youth, and also $7 million for the Workforce Competitive Trust Fund. Now, Kevin, you asked about taxes. This is the worst time to even think about raising taxes or instituting new taxes. Small businesses in my district and across the Commonwealth are suffering, and many have shut down permanently. People have lost their jobs, and many are having a hard time providing for their families. We need to adhere to all the public health guidelines and restrictions and reopen the economy as soon as possible. And Governor Baker did something yesterday, and I'm a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and when we were purview to him disclosing his revised budget, and something I agree with, and that is he said he would veto any tax increase, and he's doing exactly what I would do in terms of budgeting, because I have a vast background in terms of creating budgets. He wants to invest $107 million in new funding for Small Business Recovery Plan, which is a great start. And his budget calls for spending rather than reducing and increasing taxes. And that is an avenue that I would take.
Mr. Crum?
Sure. So the issue before us is how do we build back better and how do we reinvigorate and re-energize our economy? And I agree with Senator Tran, it is not by raising taxes. If you are a student of economic recovery and history, whether it's the Great Depression or the Great Recession, we need to spend money and get people back to work and keep small businesses afloat. So Governor Baker has a great vision, and part of the state senator's job over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, really the next term, is going to be to make sure that that budget is directed to the small businesses in this community that need it. And there's some great programs that are happening right now. The North Central Massachusetts Development Corps is doing micro-targeted loans of up to $20,000 to keep small businesses afloat who need capital. So as a legislator, I'm going to go to Beacon Hill and make sure those funds are getting to the small businesses that need it and need to stay alive. What we also need is somebody who is able to, in the legislature, work with their staff. I mean, we are facing unprecedented budget uncertainty, right? We don't know what the shortfalls are going to be. We're not sure what our revenue is going to be, and we don't have an understanding yet of federal relief, but we know there is federal relief out there. So the most effective state senator is going to be someone who is making sure that small businesses know what opportunities there are out there for relief and making sure that they have the assets to stay afloat.
Senator?
Yes, let me respond to that. And candidate Cronin mentioned that North Central Massachusetts Corporation, and I can guarantee you that if you ask them, I'm the right senator. He also mentioned about that he doesn't know about the shortfall in the budget. I do. Let me tell you something, Kevin. In my 2 years in the Senate, the state realized the lowest unemployment rate ever, under 3%. Also, during my time in the Senate in the last 2 years, the state's stabilization fund, which most people call the rainy day fund, was at its highest amount, $3.5 billion. Now, let me tell you what I have done in my district. I was able to secure $100,000 for North Central Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce to develop a 25-year economic development blueprint. And this story was in the newspaper a couple months ago. I was able to bring home $500,000 for the Westminster Bridge renovation, which cost $515,000, and the state put in $15,000 because I believe infrastructure plays a huge role in economic development. I helped secure $3 million for Fitchburg downtown plan, $1.5 million for Clinton High Street. I also secured projects for Route 117 in Bolton. And if you travel across my district and you realize all the infrastructure work that is taking place, Kevin, I have a hand in each and every one of those projects. And I can assure you that after my reelection and I gain a higher leadership position, my district will be one of the best districts in the Commonwealth.
So the senator said once he gains another leadership position, the senator had a leadership position. The senator was stripped of his leadership position for public corruption. So the senator is going to talk a lot about his accomplishments, and he's already started, right? And he's done this every election. He takes credit for every nickel and dime that comes into our district. He doesn't give credit to the House delegation, just like we just saw. And so the question for voters is, who is going to lead the team? Who is going to work with the team? And, you know, my experience in the Army, people are attracted to leaders, and leaders are magnetic, and people will fight to work with great leaders. And in the House delegation that is Senator Tran's team, there are 8 members. Of the 8 members, 0 support his reelection. 0 want to work with him for another 2 terms. So I think that speaks, their actions speak louder than Senator Tran's words.
Kevin, you know, the topic is economic development and creating jobs. And when we're focusing on economic development, it requires someone who has a business background and actually work. I'm the only candidate to satisfy those requirements. Now, candidate Cronin spoke about the delegation. I want to make this extremely clear to my district and to the people that I serve. When I go to Beacon Hill, I do not follow leaders. I want to make sure that I compromise, cooperate with them, and bring resources and funding home to my district. It is not the approval of my delegation that I set out to get. It is the approval of the people I represent in my district. And if you look at the list of people who and groups who have endorsed me in this re-election, it is 2 pages long. So those endorsements are the ones that count. Now, speaking of leaders, I spent 23 years in the private sector. I managed hundreds of people on 3 continents. I was responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And if I wasn't a leader, those jobs would be gone. Those people would be unemployed. I worked 21 hours a day, 7 days a week when I was in the private sector to make sure those employees can provide for their families and their children. So that's leadership.
So a few things. First, Senator Tran has been misleading with his endorsements. He put out the endorsement of somebody today, 24 hours ago, and that person does not support Senator Tran's reelection. Senator Tran was asked to take that endorsement down, and he refused. So maybe that's why people don't want to work with Senator Tran. And he says that his private sector experience translates to a vision for economic development. When he was here 2 years ago for the Sentinel debate, he was asked, what is the key to economic development? He said, me. Economic development is going to require a long-term vision. If this place, our region, our home, is going to remain a vibrant place to live and to work and to raise a family, I hope our strategy isn't you, Senator Tran. I hope it is building a team to lead the region forward, and that's why I'm running for state senate. And fundamentally, we are going to have to make really smart investments in ourselves. We need more access to early childhood education. By the time a kid gets to kindergarten, we can predict right now whether they're going to a 4-year college or won't graduate high school. That's the status quo in places like French Hill and in Cleghorn, and that's unacceptable. We need more access to vocational training to grow our workforce. More than 40% of the graduates from Monty Tech don't go to 4-year college or go to 4-year colleges, and there's a lot of kids at Gardner High School and Fitchburg High School who really need a trade and a passport to the middle class. That's what I'm going to fight for. That's my vision for economic development. Senator Tran has been on the city council for 12 years, and he talks about his planning board experience in the city of Fitchburg. The city of Fitchburg needs $70 million to get its roads up to grade. That happened on your watch, Senator Tran, and it receives $1.1 million in Chapter 90 funding. So Senator Tran's problem, the critical infrastructure crisis is getting worse. I've got a vision to bring tens of millions of dollars to this district to invest in vocational training, to invest in pre-K, and to invest in our roads, bridges, and public transportation, and my opponent doesn't.
So candidate Cronin is all over the place. I mean, all over the place. First of all, he spoke about someone recalling an endorsement. No one has contacted me asking me to take down an endorsement. He talked about me not having a vision. Well, let me tell you, here's a vision. Go speak to the 3 chambers of commerce in my district, and they will tell you that I've worked with them closely, especially North Central Mass Chamber of Commerce, with the funding that I brought home for them to begin their 25-year economic development blueprint. I did something that people told me that was impossible and would take over 10 years to do. I was able to do it under 2 years by legislating and getting a commitment from the governor and the state to do a study on Route 2 for safety improvement, because Route 2 is the corridor that connects us to West and East Massachusetts. It's our economic development, economic growth generator. So I was able to do that. That is vision. I don't understand what candidate Cronin is getting at. He's all over the place. If you want to talk about transportation, I'm a ranking member on that committee, and I will educate you about transportation if we want to talk about that.
So I'd be happy to respond to that. Is that okay?
If we could, we need to move on to a lot of other questions, but it seems you said something about endorsement. He said he doesn't know anything about endorsement. Do you want to address that real quickly and clarify what you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the paper next week. Let's look at Facebook. So there is a person who you said endorsed you, and then hours later on Facebook, that person put out a post that said they do not support your reelection. And they told me that they asked you to take that down and you refused. And again, maybe that's why people don't trust you, Senator Tran. Maybe that's why 0 people in your delegation support your reelection. Maybe that's why the mayor of Fitchburg from your home city, who supported you 2 years ago, supports me now.
That's very interesting, because why would someone call you and tell you those things and not directly call me? And second of all, I'm from Fitchburg. All the residents in Fitchburg know everything that I have done and all the things that I have provided for the city. I grew up in Fitchburg. Now, if the mayor decided to endorse you, that's his prerogative. The mayor is also a registered Democrat. He endorsed my prior opponent, which I defeated, and then he endorsed me, and now he endorsed you.
Why does he
So-
not want to work with you anymore, Senator Tran? And
Well-
is it the same reason why this other mayor is probably going to be pretty upset with you speaking for him?
I'm not speaking I have no
I'd
idea
like to
what you're
move on,
talking
Kevin,
about.
but I'll tell you, I'm really interested to see the papers in the next week.
Absolutely.
And do you?
I have no idea what you're talking about,
That's
Candidate Cronin.
All right,
It's very interesting. You don't want to focus on the issues.
I'm ready to move on.
This is your game plan, your whole entire campaign, and now you bring it onto the debate floor.
For over 50 years, Massachusetts has had a state income tax, and for that entire history, that state income tax has been a flat tax. Everyone pays the same rate, no matter what their income level is. The state legislature will be voting on what's called a fair share amendment, which would put a different tax rate on top earners. Do you support or oppose the Fair Share Act, Mr. Cronin?
I support the Fair Share Amendment, and there's one reason that I support it. It is the right way to make the investments that we can't afford to not make here in the Worcester and Middlesex District. And Senator Tran talks about his vision for Route 2, and we're going to open up the corridor. Senator Tran, how are we going to pay for it? I support the Fair Share Amendment because we live in a country right now where 3 individuals control 50% of the wealth in our country. I support the Fair Share Amendment because we have a billionaire president who pays between $0 and $750 a year. There are investments here in Fitchburg and Leominster and Cleghorn and French Hill and the neighborhoods that I'm going to advocate for that can't afford to not have new investments. So the Fair Share Amendment is going to raise $1 billion in revenue for transportation and $1 billion in revenue for education. Those are investments that we need to make. Those are investments in our roads and bridges in Fitchburg to fix the $70 million gap. Those are investments in transportation infrastructure, so our commuter rail, where a yearly pass costs $4,000, is not and does not remain a prohibitive barrier to opportunity. That's how we're going to get the money to send the 3- and 4-year-old kids in places like Fitchburg and Leominster and Gardner to provide them early childhood education so that by the time they get to kindergarten, they already have the social, emotional, and behavioral foundation that's going to set them up for success in every classroom for the rest of their life and whatever they go on to do. That's how we're going to increase access to vocational training here in Massachusetts. The average age of an electrician in Central Mass is 57 years old. I've got a plan to fix that. I am going to make sure that there are more seats for teenagers to learn a skilled trade and join our workforce. And he can talk about vision, but he can't talk about how to pay for it.
Senator.
Well, the millionaire tax is also known as the Fair Share Amendment. As you said, Kevin, this is also known as the graduated income tax, which is a disaster on the federal level. You and I had this discussion before in 2018 during my other re-election. Massachusetts right now has a flat income tax, and it has worked fine. Now, based on what my opponent has said, he has very little knowledge on this topic. As a matter of fact, on many other topics. By raising the income tax to 4%, it's not fair. It should be called the unfair amendment, and it punishes hardworking people. And also, you should also include in that hardworking people the small businesses. That's who it punishes. Now, the amendment called for allocating the money raised for education and infrastructure. That's what my opponent has said. What he doesn't know is that this amendment was declared by the court unconstitutional. Why is that? Let me educate him. It's unconstitutional because you cannot allocate the funds from an amendment. It just does not work. What I'm hearing from candidate Cronin here is that he wants more taxes, and he wants to hurt small businesses. That's what taxes do. That's what the millionaire tax does, and we cannot afford to increase taxes, go institute new taxes in a time where we're suffering during this pandemic.
Mr. Cronin?
Yeah, sure. So, Senator, you're talking to a combat veteran. Okay, I'd appreciate it if you called me Mr. Cronin. I call you Senator. I wonder if you could reciprocate the respect. It doesn't hurt our small businesses, because I don't know many small businesses here that have owners that make over $1 million in salary. And what this tax does is every dollar over the first $1 million in income is taxed at 4%, right? That is about moving Beacon Hill wealth and Nantucket wealth and Martha's Vineyard wealth to make equitable investments in Fitchburg and Leominster. And let me educate the senator. $1 million. In the next legislative session, there's going to be a vote in the legislature for or against the Fair Share Amendment to put it on a ballot for voters to decide. And I believe voters should decide that. So Senator Tran is going to vote against it and vote against bringing tens of millions of dollars to the Worcester and Middlesex District for education and transportation. There's a stark contrast here. I am going to vote for it. I am going to vote for it because that's what our community needs if we're going to make equitable investments and if we're going to make the investments that we need to make to be vibrant in the future.
Mr. Cronin,
Thank you.
you must have something that would tell you how I'm going to vote in the future.
Your
I don't
word,
even know
Senator.
how
You just
I'm going
said you're
to vote.
against it.
Now, Mr. Cronin, I said I was against the Fair Share Amendment that was proposed. What the legislature will put before us, we don't know.
I'm sorry.
Now, I'm not sure what small business or businesses that Mr. Cronin has visited, but I can tell you, small business make up close to 75–80% of our economy. I'm endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Business because they know that I know how to help small businesses. Now, when you take any small business across the Commonwealth and add up all the assets, they do exceed $1 million. But after all the expenses and costs that they incur, they don't bring home $1 million. So if you tax small businesses, you are going to devastate our economy. And that's the truth. That is the absolute truth.
So the senator is saying that I support a new tax on small businesses. That is categorically false. I do not support a new tax on small businesses. Nobody benefits from these investments more than the small businesses in our community. Our small businesses need a skilled labor force. And I don't care if you're on a construction crew or have a plumbing company or a young electrician and you're looking to grow. We need a skilled labor force, and Senator Tran is going to vote against dollars to make sure we fix the fact that the average age of an electrician is 57. I am not for small business taxes, and I will not vote to increase a single tax on a small business in this district.
Well, Kevin, if you contact NFIB and ask them the impact that this tax, the millionaire, AKA the Fair Share Amendment, would have on small business, they will tell you. Now, we talked about how to raise revenue for transportation and infrastructure. I am a ranking member sitting on the Transportation Committee. I'm also sitting on the Transportation Conference Committee, trying to reconcile a transportation bond bill. I can tell you, in that bond bill, it doesn't address the millionaire tax So if Mr. Cronin is saying that we need this fair share amendment to address our infrastructure and transportation, why isn't the Transportation Committee addressing it and using that as part of the transportation bond bill, the $18 billion transportation bond bill that we're working on right now?
Can I respond to that, Kevin?
Yep, quickly, please.
Yeah, bond bills are funny money. Bond bills are what Senator Tran has said he's been bringing back. Bond bills are what the selectmen in Bolton and Stowe and Lancaster write letters to your office about the money that you claim on mailers that people get and that they never receive. And I'd be happy to share that letter with voters and your response to it, which is you should be grateful that I get earmarks and bond bills and money you never see. Earmarks and bond bills are not a revenue stream. We need a revenue stream for transportation, infrastructure investment, and education.
This past July, both the House and the Senate approved bills to enact sweeping police reforms. However, both of them, while both bodies approved slightly different versions of the bill, it's stuck in conference committee, which means most likely the can is going to be kicked to the next legislative session to deal with police reform. Would you have voted in favor or in opposition to the police reform bill passed in July? And what would you be looking for, if anything, for a police reform bill when in the next legislative session? Mr. Cronin.
Sure. So first I want to thank all the police officers and first responders in our community. And to answer your question, I would have voted with Senator Tran. I would have voted against the bill. I thought the process was really bad, and it broke down trust between police officers and our communities, and that is the problem that we need to solve. But it's also fitting, I think, for a commentary on what's wrong with our politics, right? We have been given this false choice that you can either support the police or that you can deliberately and systematically acknowledge and work to fix that there are systemic inequalities in our society. And so what am I looking for in a future police bill, right? Making people accountable for gross misconduct, right? But not allowing a police officer who's conscientiously trying to do the right thing to be subject to civil liability, and for somebody to come after their house or their life savings. That's unacceptable. And I want the bill to take bold action to address root causes of inequality. And I'll leave it at that for right now.
Senator.
Thank you, Kevin. As you know, there are two bills right now in the Police Reform Conference Committee to be reconciled. The Senate bill, as you know by now, that I voted against the bill, and I would do so again if the bill doesn't change drastically. You know, the bill was a knee-jerk reaction and politically driven by legislators and activist groups that did not include public safety professionals and experts in the discussion and the drafting of the bill. Kevin, let's keep in mind that we are not Minneapolis. So let's give our men and women in blue in this state the credit they deserve. You know, the Senate bill did not include public hearings, and that was one of the key factors in why I voted against the bill. It included provisions that would impact all public employees, and none of which was invited to the table. Now, the bill also included things that would make it very difficult for officers to perform their jobs, and they would risk their lives every time they put on that uniform. Now, some of the provisions included prohibiting schools from cooperating with law enforcement agencies, prohibiting law enforcement officers from using a chokehold for self-defense, removing the requirement for a school resource officer, which is so important in our communities, allowing a person to bring civil lawsuits against officers, and also the bill impedes on due process, which is a constitutional right that everyone is afforded to. So there are some other provisions that we can talk about. But as I said, I will vote against this bill again when it comes back to the Senate floor if it doesn't change drastically. And what I did, I used common sense to drive my judgment. And that's why I am endorsed by the Massachusetts Police Chief Association, the Massachusetts Coalition of Police, New England Police Benevolent Association, and many other public safety groups.
So Senator Tran is trying to paint himself as this ally of law and order, but it's a sharp area where his narrative doesn't reflect the public record. And there was reporting on this today in Commonwealth Magazine. But it is a publicly reported fact that Senator Tran is the subject of a criminal investigation by the Fitchburg Police Department and the Attorney General's office for allegedly cheating a 78-year-old widow out of her late husband's property. And this isn't slander. This has been in the Boston Globe. It's been in the Commonwealth Magazine. You haven't given the public a public statement on it. And my question for you is, don't 160,000 people that you're trying to represent deserve a comment on the public record before they go and vote to elect you to another term in the state Senate? And when can we expect or receive a full and open accounting of what's going on?
So the topic is on police reform, and Mr. Cronin took this turn. And what he just said, people should hold him accountable for that. Make sure he produced the documents that he's talking about. Now, let me address at least what I know. Mr. Cronin, these are serious times for serious people. And it's unfortunate that you would stoop as low as to drudge up tabloid news that you know to be false as a way of defaming me during this debate. People in my district are struggling to find jobs or keep their jobs. Teachers, parents, and students are having a tough time with remote learning. They're sick, some are dying. Those are the issues that I've been working on tirelessly and that I'm here to talk about. And you're sitting in your parents' basement scrolling through comments on social media about things that didn't happen.
Senator
I have too
Tran?
much respect for the people I represent to stoop that low.
Senator
And you
Tran,
should know better.
Senator Tran, are you the subject of an open criminal investigation with the Fitchburg Police and the Attorney General? And do your constituents deserve to know that? Because the issues that you describe are so important. And we need an advocate who is going to give everything that they have to solve those issues and not be worried about other things going on. I believe that, consider me old-fashioned, but I believe 160,000 people here deserve to know whether their state senator is a crook. Yes or no?
I have
Are you the subject of a criminal investigation? Yes or no?
As far as I know, no. And I think you should ask whatever agencies you're talking about, Mr. Cronin, okay? I ran for office 9 times in this district. I served on the city council for 6 terms, and this is my 3rd state senate election. And I have never seen the things that I have seen during this round. The rumors, lies, and personal attacks on my family and I are hurtful and unimaginable. Even at this debate, instead of talking about issues and how we can serve our people, we're talking about this. People steal, people steal and deface my campaign signs in broad light, Mr. Cronin. They write terrible, horrible things about me on social media, and my supporters have been threatened. You know, these are the actions of an evil, despicable, immature, and desperate campaign. Matter of fact, Mr. Cronin, your campaign should be listed under the National Registry of Hate. That's how bad it is. And I could easily walk away from this election, Mr. Cronin, but what would that say about my values, my beliefs, and give up on the people who I represent?
So this election is a referendum on how effective your leadership has been. And to the attacks on me and my campaign, I would say racist attacks are never acceptable. And unlike President Trump, who you support and you are going to vote for on November 3rd, I condemn racism unequivocally. And I admire you and what your parents did, Senator Tran. But I am talking about promises that you broke to us and your violation of the public trust. And I hope at some point we can pivot and talk about your well-established record of public corruption.
Well, that's unbelievable, isn't it? It's unbelievable that we're here supposed to discuss about issues and how we can serve the district. And this is what we're talking about. And Mr. Cronin is, again, he's saying things that I don't even know. He just said that I support President Trump and I'm going to vote for him. I haven't voted yet. And
Are you going to vote for President Trump?
We are better than this. Both of us in this race have a responsibility as leaders and embody the qualities that we want to see in our children, our friends, and our neighbors. Kevin, this is the first and last time I will address this issue in this election. Now, that's how I will conduct myself for the rest of this race. And Mr. Cronin, I invite you to join me.
Sure. So the senator just read from a prepared statement. So the idea that he doesn't know what's going on here and that he doesn't read the Boston Globe or Commonwealth Magazine is a little hard to believe. But we can't talk about the issues until we talk about your failure as a leader. And everybody should know that right now our state senator is ineffective. He was censured. And first, let's just get it all on the line. Let's talk about the facts. So Senator Tran was, and this is a separate issue from the criminal matter that we just discussed. Senator Tran was convicted of breaking the Senate rules for stealing taxpayer resources by all his peers, bipartisan and unanimous vote of his colleagues. Senator Tran was censured by the state Senate because he made deliberate choices to serve himself instead of us. And so here are the facts. And importantly, since March, Senator Tran has not disputed them. Senator Tran forced 3 of his staff members to knock doors and campaign for him for 6 months. His staff was threatened that if they didn't join in his scheme to break the law, that they would be fired and lose their jobs. And he was convicted of breaking the Senate rules by every single member of the state Senate. Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. There was bipartisan consensus that what Senator Tran did was wrong.
I'm going to let Senator Tran respond, and then we're going to move on to issues because we're running out of time.
So I was not censored. And let me address another thing that Mr. Cronin brought up, because he doesn't want to talk about issues. And he wants to talk about the ethics report. You know, my colleagues in the Senate made their decision based on false information provided by my political opponents, which I was never given the opportunity to contest. There was no due process afforded to me as part of the Senate's report. I never learned the identity of the witnesses in the report. I never had an opportunity to confront the allegations. And I didn't even see the Senate report until after it was published. You know, Kevin, I maintain, and I will always maintain, that I did not do anything intentionally wrong with respect to my staff and volunteers' work on my prior campaign. Now, the report has caused me and my family pain and humiliation, Mr. Cronin, because the allegations go to the core of my character, something that the people of this district, regardless of political affiliation, know from experience that it is unimpeachable.
So I'd like to respond, Kevin. This is Senator Tran wants to talk about the issues. Senator Tran has avoided every single debate forum that's been proposed. So we need to talk about leadership before we talk about the issues. And I will stay for as long as you want. And we can drag this debate on another 4 hours to get to the issues, but we need to talk about integrity and leadership right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we did spend about 15 minutes on that, so let's just get to a couple of issues.
Just very quickly, Kevin, this is the only debate that we were invited to. Just for the record.
What about the candidate forum in Clinton that you said you couldn't make because you weren't doing public events?
Mr. Cronin, my mother has been in the intensive care unit for 6 weeks. My family and I are deciding what to do with my mother. I sit on 11 committees, 2 out of 5 conference committee. I'm right now involved in the public hearings with the Holyoke Soldiers Home, and I have budget work to do. That forum I politely turned down because that was in the same time frame that my mother was going through a treatment at UMass Medical Center. So let that be known.
If we could, and healthcare, including preventative and routine care. Do you consider that to be a right or a commodity? And by that, I'm asking whether or not you support a single-payer system where all residents have equal access to care, or should healthcare continue to be an insurance product purchased from the private sector? Senator Tran.
Thank you, Kevin. Here's another leadership position that I'm in. I'm a ranking member on the Healthcare Finance Committee, and I'm also sitting on the conference committee that is tasked to reconcile one of the major bills, which is the putting patients first bill. In the last 2 years, I helped pass the opioid bill as well as the mental health parity bill. The bills allow licensed pharmacists to dispense naloxone, protect patients and their privacy, reimbursing mental health providers equitably, creating a mental health workforce pipeline, creating a telehealth behavioral health pilot program. Now, I mentioned that I also sit on the Healthcare Finance Conference Committee, where we're working to reconcile the two putting patients first bill. And I was instrumental in helping pass that in the Senate. That bill allocates $150.2 million to create 5 new recovery centers in Massachusetts and support substance use disorder, $5.5 million for community-based harm reduction services. The bill also ensures patients have permanent access to expansive telehealth care, and improved access to high-quality health care and expands the healthcare workforce. Now, I mention all this before I answer your question, Kevin, is because it is very important for government to provide the funding and the resources in order for us to provide health care to people. And I believe that health care should be affordable and accessible to everybody. But here's something that I differ on, because I believe that government should provide the funding and resources to provide, to help the healthcare industry it does not mean that government should govern healthcare, because our country have the greatest healthcare in the world. Everybody comes to the United States to get care. But if we put it in the hands of the government, that healthcare is not going to be the same. So there's a difference. Single payer system is essentially a healthcare system that is run and operate by the government.
So I support a single payer system in principle, but it's not going to be myself or Senator Tran or the state government that gets us there, right? If you go to Haywood Hospital and meet with them, more than 60% of their receipts are from the federal government. So that will require transformational change and action at the federal level, not the state level. But I'll tell you, what I've talked about on this campaign in terms of healthcare and improving healthcare delivery is mental health treatment and substance use disorder treatment, specifically at the point of entry. And this is something that my family has lived through. And there is a failed system at the point of entry, right? Too many people enter the mental health treatment system or substance use treatment system in the back of a cop car, and police don't have the resources to bring the people that need help to treatment. We've talked a lot about a pilot program called restoration centers, and what restoration centers do, and there's a pilot program right now in Middlesex County, but it is align the resources that don't exist right now in the ER at Leominster Hospital to provide services to people in a mental health crisis, right? Social workers to find inpatient programs, psychiatrists, psychologists, and again, a wraparound 24-hour service to fix the broken system at the point of entry. So that's a pilot program in Middlesex County. That's something I want to work in the state Senate to refine and expand across the Commonwealth. But I'd also like to return to Senator Tran saying that he's been a champion for the opioid. He voted for the opioid crisis, but in 2018, that was the last year in Worcester County that opioid deaths rose. And Senator Tran wasn't involved in the people's work in 2018. He was abusing his office in 2018.
Okay, if we could, we need to get to closing statements. If we could, Mr. Cronin, 3 minutes for a closing statement.
Sure, so don't believe what I say. Read the undisputed findings of fact in the Senate Council report, because when Bruce Tarr, the Republican minority leader, and every other Republican read the report, they voted to ban Senator Tran and kick him out of his leadership position. Senator Tran right now cannot speak to his staff. We are in a crisis right now, and we need leadership, and Senator Tran can't speak to his team because the Senate and his colleagues don't trust him. So Senator Tran ran for office on the promise that he was about honesty and hard work. And he wants to tell us that, this report, there wasn't a cost here for us. But when Senator Tran was misusing his office and resources in 2018 to get himself elected, at Leominster Hospital in October of 2018, we lost the cardiac rehab unit. We lost the pediatric inpatient unit. Opioid deaths in Worcester County were rising. In Fitchburg, at Burbank Hospital, we lost the urgent care. Those aren't coming back, and Senator Tran wasn't fighting for them. And because he violated the public trust, he does not deserve another term in the state Senate. And to close, I would say that Senator Tran has failed his test of leadership. The senator that is banned from his office, the senator that still, to this day, 6 months later, when faced with undisputed facts and findings of public corruption, turns around and calls his colleagues liars. That is a senator that has failed his test of leadership, and we are all harmed by that. Senator Tran has embarrassed his office in this district and himself. We cannot settle for a public servant that doesn't understand the distinction between public service and public corruption. This is a region that needs a fighter, and I've been serving and leading in this country for my entire life. The things going on are too important, and I am asking people for their vote because I want to take the things I learned in combat in the Army, in West Point, and growing up here to fight for all of you and to use the public trust to advocate for you and on your behalf. We are in a battle for the soul of our nation. Leadership and integrity is on the ballot, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 3rd.
Senator Tran, closing statement.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Kevin, for this opportunity. Thank you to FATV for hosting this, and also thank you to everyone at home for listening and watching. Also thank you to Mr. Cronin for joining me at this debate tonight. Prior to COVID-19, in just 2 years, through economic development and legislation, I helped build one of the strongest economies in the state. And I have to reiterate this because it is very important during this time. I also helped pass the patient health care bill to address healthcare issues. And something that I mentioned before, and I need to reiterate again, talking about leadership, I advocated and voted for the Student Opportunity Act, increasing school funding to the highest level, and I brought home more than $44 million in budget earmarks, grants, and bond projects. I'm the only candidate on this floor here tonight who has business, economic development, healthcare, transportation, and education experience. You know, candidate Cronin, through his campaign, never once said he wants to work for the people and serve the people. Candidate Cronin, and let me take that back and respect your request. Mr. Cronin was on the Flap television show with you, Kevin, and when you asked him why he wants to be a state senator, his response was, quote unquote, it's an opportunity. Mr. Cronin has nothing to offer. Even worse, he wants you to vote for him. But prior to this year, he has never voted in a regular local election, and he has never voted in a state or federal election. That is not leadership. He has no experience whatsoever. Massachusetts is going through tough times, and we cannot afford to put feelings of entitlement over experience and accomplishments. We cannot afford to go back to the status quo and politics behind closed doors. I was educated by the public school system and graduated from Brandeis University. I went on to graduating, I went on to acquiring 23 years of business experience and was responsible for hundreds of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. I volunteered on several committees and commissions, served 4 years on the planning board, 12 years on the city council, and became the first Vietnamese ever to be elected to the legislature, the first minority elected from this district, and the first and only Asian born to be elected to the state senate. That is progress. Now, I can relate to everyone in this district. Experience and accomplishments matter. This district is strong under my leadership. Don't ask any other elected officials. Go ask the people themselves. So let's continue moving forward with me. I'm asking for your support and vote on November 3rd, and thank you very much.
That concludes this debate for the Worcester and Middlesex State Senate race between incumbent Senator Dean Tran and challenger John Cronin. The election is November 3rd. You can mail in your vote. You can vote early or vote in person on Election Day. Plenty of options for you, no excuses. Make a plan, go out and vote. Thank you.